Hello, friends. This is William, Believe Unlimited. Today, I want to talk about it's not my fault and what's not our fault. When it isn't our fault, then it's the fault of somebody else. And there are times that somebody else has done things to us and it's not our fault. But when we have experiences in our life that we blame others or we point to others as the reason that this is because others have done or others have caused such and such in our life, what we do is we actually give the power to create change to the person that created the problem. And by saying it's not our fault and truly believing it's not our fault, we forgo and we give away any power we have at changing where we're at and what we're experiencing right now, what we're going through. So it may be true that the situation that we're in is not our fault. It may not be true. It may just be we're blaming someone else for the problems that we have because we don't want to take responsibility for the fact that we created or co-created that experience. And it's an amazing principle that when we take responsibility, not blame, we don't blame ourselves for what we're going through, what we're experiencing, because blame it feels like a weight. It pushes down on us when we say blame. When we take responsibility and just sit and say, I take responsibility, it straightens the spine, it lifts us. We feel empowered when we take responsibility. So when it isn't our fault, but we take responsibility for where we're at, we now trigger the ability in ourselves to create change in that situation. So when we acknowledge, and excuse me, when we acknowledge and identify that we are responsible for our experience, whether it was us to blame for the situation or not, but we're responsible, we are able to make change. We're able to create something more with our experience. Excuse me. And when we do create that change, and we create the experience of being responsible in every situation and every action in our life, we are responsible for it. We now are responsible for the change, and we have the ability to choose the change because we have accepted the responsibility. It's similar, and taking responsibility for the way our life is right now sometimes can feel like too much weight to carry. And I've experienced that. It's too heavy of a load to accept that everything that has gone wrong is my responsibility, because what it was they did, and she did, and then he did, and then they, and it piled up. And to accept responsibility for all those things, it's outside of what we feel we're capable of carrying. And I put it in the place, I put it like, it's like a teeter-totter, a plank teeter-totter. So we're not trying to balance, but a plank teeter-totter. And we're walking up the teeter-totter with all of the blame and all of the, it's not my fault. And we're accumulating all of this weight on us, trying to accept responsibility for everything. And it's an uphill climb. And we're gathering it all in. And when we gather in all of our life and we become responsible for all of it, that is at the point where we cross over the pivot point. And when we make that crossover and we're now on the other side of that pivot point where we've taken responsibility for our life, we are no longer blaming anyone for our situation, that we understand that they did something to us and that we're responsible for where we are, not for what they did. We don't take responsibility for other people's actions, but we take responsibility for where we are, and that we allowed certain things to happen. We allowed ourselves to be in that situation. And we come to that point where we become fully responsible for our own lives. And we cross over that pivot point and we start walking down. Now the teeter-totter is tipped. And at one point, it's teetering on, and we can go back and blame, or we can move forward and take responsibility. And we take that responsibility and we make the choice to make our life what we choose to from the experiences we've had. The teeter-totter tips. And now we are walking with the flow instead of against the flow. And that's what it's like when we take responsibility and we let go of the, it's not my fault. It's like driving. I've heard many times people have had accidents and they stand there and go, but I was in the right of way. And I've got two rules of driving. First rule being, get from point A to point B without hitting anything. And that includes cars, people, signs, ditches. Just don't hit anything. That's the first rule of driving. And the second rule of driving is follow the rules of the road to the best of our ability without breaking rule number one. So we may have been in the right of way, but that doesn't matter if we still had a collision, if we still hit a curb, hit a sign, hit a person, hit a car. It doesn't matter if we were in the right or the wrong. We still had an accident. And when we take responsibility for the fact that we did, it's okay. We can blame somebody else for being in the wrong place, for cutting us off, or for driving through a red light. These are all legitimate blames. But it doesn't help us. We were still in an accident. And if we are the ones standing there, but I was in the right of way, it doesn't matter who was in the right of way. You may get your car fixed through somebody else's insurance if you were in the right of way. But it doesn't matter. We still had the collision, and it's the same in life. It doesn't matter if you were in the right of way or not. If we still have a collision or an impact to our lives, we must take responsibility for getting from point A to point B without hitting anything. And if we do, we take responsibility for it. Not that we were at fault, but we are responsible for our actions. We're responsible for how we respond. We're responsible for how we move through it, how we learn from it, how we grow from it, how we change and tweak who we really are to be a more understanding, a better person, whatever we can get from that experience. So it's not about who's at fault, whether they are or I am or the inner me is. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's, do we take responsibility to make the best of what we have before us? And how can we make the moving forward purposeful and make something of it? And I'll tell you a good story about making something good out of a mess in another video. In fact, we'll do it next time. So look forward to tomorrow's. But I want you to know that it's not my fault. It takes away every power that we have to change. Because if it is their fault, then they have to change what is to change my life. And when I am responsible for my experience, for what I contributed to it, I have responsibility to change it. I have the power to change it. So if you ever find yourself, or if we ever find ourselves saying, but it's not my fault, reframe that and turn that into, okay, so what is it that I can do about where I'm at currently? And now you're working in power. You've now crested the pivot point and you're going with the flow. You're going downstream instead of upstream. And that is powerful. So remember, I am responsible for my experience. And when things happen that are unexpected and don't fit with what I want for my life, then I'm responsible to make the change to change the results that I'm currently getting. And if we're okay with where we're at, no change required. But if we aren't okay with where we're at, then take responsibility for where we are. And now we have the power to change where we want to go and where we will be, because we have taken responsibility for our lives and we've accepted that everything we have experienced is part of who we are. And now we are responsible for everything that is in our life. And now you're living in power. And that's an exciting place to live. So I remember you're awesome. So you stay awesome. And we'll talk to you next time.